My father was a World War II veteran. He served in North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and then eventually ended up in Munich towards the end of the war. He was an old guy. He was 28 when he got out, 28 or 29. And that was pretty old for a young man. And he actually met General Patton in Sicily and had a conversation with him. And somewhere I have a letter of accommodation that he gave my father. And I happen to have had the honor of meeting his son. I served under his son in Germany a generation later in the 70s. And I had as a result of his inspection, I got a 4-day pass to Munich. So I'll never forget that encounter. It was a very positive encounter. And when my son, Mr. Shirtliff Nathaniel, was about 6 years old, I took him to meet some of the Doolittle Raiders. Now, I know you older guys and gals know who they are, but right after Pearl Harbor, military wasn't so great, morale was bad, and there was a mission to bomb military installations over Tokyo. It was a very daring mission. The planes could not land on aircraft carriers. They had to either basically bail out over occupied territory, and there was the last Doolittle survivor passed away last year, and we met about 7 or 8 of them, very honorable men. And I told my son and my 2 nephews who I brought, I said, you're going to meet some real heroes. They don't play baseball, they don't sing in a band. These are real heroes that put their life on the line. Well, I heard about this phenomenal man here, Bill Glenny. He lives in the Springfield area, Chicopee. You'll be 92 in a short time?
September 21st.
So he'll be 92 years old. I think he may be our oldest instructor. We did have a World War II veteran who was 87 a few years ago. So let's give, the very fact that you're 92, let's give him a hand. 92 years young. God bless you. He joined the Army in 45. He went to Germany when the war was over, and he spent his first time guarding SS, these were Nazi SS soldiers, and then he went on to guard the Nuremberg trials. And for those of you who may not be familiar, this is a picture of the Nuremberg trials, and you see that there was several trials, but this was what they call the first wave of the top Nazis. And you see all these young soldiers, and I'm sure Mr. Glenny probably knows a few of these men. The man here with the headphones is Hermann Goering. He was one of the top Nazis. He was the head of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. The man next to him is Rudolf Hess, and some of these other folks he'll talk about more. Ribbentrop, the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister.
Next to Hess.
Next under Hess is right. So he was only 19 years of age, and he had to guard these.
I was 18.
18.
Still 18 at the time.
So I'm going to pass the mic over, and he's going to share some of his personal experiences. So here you go.
Okay. Thank you, Al. How many of you ever heard of the Nuremberg trials? Oh my God, okay. Let me sit down here for a minute until I get my balance. Okay, can you see this picture? This is a picture of the Palace of Justice where the Nuremberg trials took place in Nuremberg, Germany. Now if you look at this is the front of the building. Now they held the trials in Nuremberg because they wanted to make it actually in Berlin, the capital of Germany. But Germany was so well bombed that they couldn't find any buildings that were big enough to hold the trials and the people that were involved in the trial. So they went to Nuremberg. This is what they found. And right there is the front entrance. It's called the Palace of Justice. In back of this is the prison. I was in back. You can't see. I've got some pictures in here. The prison. I was in the back of the prison. Now, if you notice, there's very few cars going by the road. There's a railroad track there. Can you see it? A trolley where a trolley goes back. I don't know if you can see it there. The only thing that went by the Palace of Justice is a railroad car. No automobiles were there. unless they had permission. The streets were blocked off on both sides, 3 down, so you'd have to detour around the Palace of Justice. They didn't want anybody to stop in front of this. And they notified the authorities of the trolleys that went by there. They notified the authorities not to stop in front of the Palace of Justice, to go right past the Palace of Justice. No stops will be made. If the trolley car does stop there and somebody gets off, they will be shot. Them the orders they had. The authorities had the orders. So no trolley car stopped in front of the Palace of Justice. If you want to take this and show it around, you want to just show that around? You know, just, okay. Now you see these men up here. Let me get up here, okay. All right, we can go with these men. The first man is Hermann Goering. He was the commander-in-chief of the German Air Force. He was at number 2 on Hitler's list. Hitler said that, I know of no man that can serve me better than Hermann Goering. And he says, he's placing him, if anything happens to him, Hermann Goering will be his successor. So Hermann Goering was a number 2 man. Believe me, he was a brilliant man. He had an IQ almost genius. The next to him is Rudolf Hess. He was, Rudolf Hess is, they tried him, but they gave him life. He got life in prison. Let me sit down. Rudolf Hess got life in prison. And let me see what I can tell you. Well, Hess had what you call a deteriorating mind. He wasn't all there. I don't know if anybody knows that. But the psychiatrist put it like this. He said, if the road was sanity and the sidewalk insanity, then Rudolf Hess is walking on a curb. So he was on a borderline of being sane and not sane. And of course, not the psychiatrist, the psychologist just put it this way. He said, in layman's terms, Rudolf Hess can be fine for maybe 5 minutes, and then he goes completely off. He goes off, and there's nothing there. The next man next to him on his left is Joshua von Ribbentrop. Anybody ever hear of him? The foreign diplomat. He was Hitler's diplomat, foreign diplomat. Okay, he hung. You know, he was found guilty of the atrocities. He was hung at Nuremberg. Well, so was Hermann Goering. Hermann Goering was found guilty on all counts of the indictment, but he committed suicide less than just several hours before his hanging was supposed to take place. He was condemned to hang. Okay, then you can see in the back. Okay, now, the one in the back got dark glasses. You see him in back of Goring? That's that's Karl Donitz. Anybody ever hear Karl Donitz? Karl Donitz, oh, okay. Karl Donitz was the commander-in-chief of the German Navy. Erich Reiter. Karl Donitz was the commander-in-chief also of the German Navy. Right next to him, and the submarines too. Donitz is known mostly for submarines. Right next to him is Erich Reiter, commander-in-chief of the German Navy. So they represented the Navy. And you had all phases, and then you had the 2 commanders-in-chief of the German armies. You can't see them there, but I've got another picture here. I've got a picture right here. That's wait, I've got some more I'll go through here. The commander-in-chief of the German armies was Field Marshal Keitel. Anybody ever hear Keitel? How about Jodl, Alfred Jodl, General Oberst Alfred Jodl? Okay, they both hung at Nuremberg. And They were professional. You know, a field marshal takes orders. The highest trained soldiers in the world were Prussian officers. You know, if you become a Prussian officer, this is von Rundstedt. I met this. I spoke to this man naturally. I got his autograph. This is Field Marshal Gert von Rundstedt. Did you ever hear of Gert von Rundstedt? Brilliant man. Here's commander-in-chief. Of course, you only make a field marshal is when you're fighting in a field. If there's a war, you become a field marshal. If there's no war, you can't become a field marshal. So I met the field marshal here, and then I also met von Rundstedt, the field marshal, and Jodl. Both these men represented the German armies. Of course, Adolf Hitler was a supreme commander. But when these men received the verdict, both these military men received a verdict which was death by hanging. They didn't think they didn't excuse the verdict. They said they deserved to die, but they wanted to change the method of execution. They said, we don't want to hang. There were officers in the German army, and to hang a Prussian officer, to hang is this mic okay? Can you hear all right? Yeah. To hang a Prussian officer is like committing a crime. You don't use a rope. You only hang criminals. They said, we're not criminals. So they petitioned the courts through their lawyers. They said that we'll accept the verdict, death, but they want to change the method of execution from hanging to a firing squad. A firing squad is a soldier's way of dying. You die in a field, you're shot. That's an honorable death. To hang is a criminal offense. And they said, we are not criminals. We are soldiers, and we were following orders, and we would like this petition to be carried through. The execution, instead of hanging, we would like a firing squad. So the judges deliberated on this, and they sent back, you are not soldiers. You are criminals, and you will hang as criminals. And they did hang as criminals. And this is quite a man right here. If you ever seen this, a typical Prussian, the difference between a Prussian officer and one of our officers, you go to West Point for 4 years, you come out and you're an officer. To be a Prussian, you spend your whole life in the military. You're 7 years old, you go to an academy. There was a von Rundstedt in the Prussian army since the 14th century, so it's right in the family. So 7 years old, you're going to an academy. By the time you're a teenager, you're already in the army, you're a lieutenant, and you work your way up to a field marshal. If you can get that, if you can get up that high. Well, that takes care of this here. And this is a picture of the courtroom. That's a picture of the courtroom, what it looked like. You can see where the prisoner's dock is. Can you see the prisoner's dock there, Hermann Göring? It's up there like that. Hermann, okay. You can send this around if you want. Now there are 21 major war criminals there, representing all phases of the German war machine. You got your Navy, you got your Army, you got your Air Force, you got all your, my goodness, all the politicians were there. And while I was there, I was fortunate enough, I'm guarding these prisoners now. And I said, gee, I'm going to do something a little different. 18 years old, you do some things that they're never going to catch me. I'm 18. It's always the other guy to get. That's the way I felt when I was 18. They're not going to catch me. I can do whatever I want, which I did. And before you go on the cells, you're given orders by the colonel. Oh my God! Here's the colonel of the prison, Colonel Andrus. He's what you'd call a very strict officer. They give him certain names. Well, anyway, I said, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to get autographs. I'm going to start collecting autographs. So I started collecting autographs. And of course, he was one of the first. There's von Rundstedt's autograph right in the picture at the bottom. See his autograph? You want to... That's his picture right there, and that's von Rundstedt. Okay, and you've got the 21 major war criminals that are on that list, and there were 21. Did you send out the list? Oh, okay. There's 21 major war criminals on that list, and the Jew baiter number one, of course, you heard about the Holocaust. I hope nobody forgot that, jeez. Okay, the Holocaust, where over 6 million Jews were exterminated in the concentration camps. And the Jew baiter number one is not on this. I'll show you. I'll show you where he is in there. I got a picture of all of them. Jew baiter number one was Julius Streicher. Anybody ever hear of Julius Streicher? Nobody ever?
Yeah.
You heard Julius Streicher? Good. Okay. Julius Streicher was considered Jew baiter number one because he hated the Jews so much. He says, I could tell a Jew by the looks of his face, he gave you these idiotic things, a Streicher. Well, when I went to get Streicher's autograph, I'll tell you a little story here. I went to get Streicher's autograph. So by that time, I had a little collection of pieces of paper, and I'd have a pen, and I'd stick them in through the cell window of the prison. The prison had a door, and, it was a wooden door with an opening, a window in it about 16 inches square, somewhere around there, 16, 20 inches square, and you'd watch them sleep. The prisoners were watched 24 hours a day. So I was there 24 hours on, 24 hours off, 24 hours on, continuously. So I was with these prisoners quite a bit. So when I went to get Julius Streicher's autograph, I took the pen and the pencil, I shoved them in a window in the cell door, and I says, I think I called him Julius. Streicher. I said, autograph. And he comes over and he looks at me, and he couldn't speak German, but he says, Nein. He says, ein Autograph. He says, ein Zigaretten. No, he wanted chewing gum. He says, it's the other guy who wanted it. So Julius Streicher said, Kaugummi. He wanted chewing gum. Anybody speak German here? Okay, Kaugummi means chewing gums. So I didn't know it at the time. I finally figured it out, when I left. So he wanted chewing gum for an autograph. I said, nine. Next time, so we're bargaining like this, So I says, I'll give it to you later on, and I'm trying to tell him next time. So anyway, he takes the paper, got a signature on there. Can you see a signature, Julius Streicher on there? Terrible handwriting. He could have been another Adolf Hitler, one of the handwriting experts. Just told me, a brutal man. So he gives me his autograph, and you know what happened? He never got the chewing gum. I got the autograph. That's just a little story threw in there. And the most difficult one was Rudolf Hess, because he was now there. You know, you'd talk to Hess, you'd go to talk to Hess, he'd turn around and he'd shout at you and he'd start babbling. So I didn't know that. I'd let him go. So it took me a few tries. You know, I said, I got to wait till he calms down. And I finally did get him where Rudolph Hess, officer, and I was pointing to an officer. He looks, and I finally got his autograph. He's probably the most difficult one on there. So I managed to get all those autographs. And you're seeing them all there. And they called us to, oh, Jesus. Okay, here's 2 pictures. One with the scars on his face is Ernest Kaltenbrunner. Anybody ever hear Ernest Kaltenbrunner? Oh, okay. Is that Al? Al? No, yes. Okay, geez, you might as well come up here, my goodness. Okay, he's the one with the scars on his face, Ernest Kaltenbrunner. He more or less replaced Himmler. Himmler committed suicide? He more or less replaced him. That's him on the right-hand side. On the other side is Field Marshal Keitel, the military man, the commander-in-chief of the German armies. Of course, he hung. That's the one I just told you the story where he said he wanted to be shot rather than hung. You want to send these? Around? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I've got quite a few here, of course. Here's an interesting picture here. There's Judas Streicher right here, Jew Beta number 1. Right next to him is Rudolf Hess. And take a good look at Hess. It looks like Hess is reading this book. Now I'm guarding him in a prison. It looks like he's reading this book, but he never turns the page. Here you go. And the other one is the commander-in-chief of the German armies. Oh, jeez. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, here was what Keitel looked. This is what Keitel looked like in full uniform, rather than as a prisoner. See, there were two sides. There were 2 sides to the prison. You had the courtroom. All the cameras were running in the courtroom. Everything said in the courtroom when it was in session was all recorded. Everything was recorded in the courtroom. When you see them all dressed, they got ties, they got coats, and they look good. They look good. As soon as they left the courtroom, you flip the coin over now. They come back to their cells, no coat, no necktie, no belts, nothing they could hurt themselves with, and you'll see the difference. So this is the way I guarded them in the cells, you know, when they were just natural. And the biggest crybaby there was Ernest Kaltenbrunner. Ernest Kaltenbrunner, of course, he knew he was going to hang. They got pictures of him inspecting the concentration camps. He was like the commander-in-chief of the SS when Himmler committed suicide. And he, a brutal man, and there he is crying like a baby in a cell. You'd never see that in the courtroom. And, well, we keep going here. And this is what the cells look like. If you're inside the cell, this is what the cell will look like. And you can see the door in the back. There's a toilet there. You can see a table, a cot that's bolted up against the wall. You can't move it. You see the door, and right there, that little window, you can see a guard peeking through it. The window peeking through, watching the prisoners. Like I say, they were watched 24 hours a day. And that table was collapsible. You couldn't put any weight on it. Too much weight, it just collapses. Now, I'll tell you, you see the toilet, you can make it out there. Well, you can pass that along if you want. There's a prisoner that committed suicide in a cell. He strangled himself. Now, you wonder how he could do this. Well, what happened was, I can't think of his name offhand, just a minute.
Robert Lay?
What?
Robert Lay, L-E-Y?
I can't hear.
Robert Lay.
Robert Lay, you got it. It's Robert Lay. My good, you're right up to date on it. He should be coming over here. Robert Lay, do you know how he did it? I think you probably do. Well, what he did is he took a towel and he just stripped it down and knotted it together, made a little loop, and right there, see the toilet right there? You take a look at the toilet. Okay, where it flushes, it flushes. He's sitting down on a bowl. Right in the back, about this far, is a pipe that goes down into the toilet where it flushes the toilet. So what he did is take this rope, he put it around this pipe in the back, and he stuck his head in the noose. And he just kept turning his head, until it got tight, and he leaned forward on a toilet bowl, and he strangled himself. Got it? Okay. And after that, that's when a colonel said there's going to be one man for each prisoner, and they're going to be watched 24 hours a day. They won't be able to shave. They won't be able to go downstairs in the bathroom by themselves. There's going to be somebody there watching them continuously, 24 hours. That's when I come in the picture, and I was all over the places guarding these major war criminals. And this is what the cells look like. And the cells weren't that big. The cells were probably 7 feet wide by less than 13 feet long. So it was very, very small cells. Okay, here's a good picture. Here's a good picture of all the defendants in the prisoner's dock. Let's see if Rudolph has this there. Okay, well, there's 21 in all. That's the major war criminal. These men were responsible for everything that went on in Germany under Hitler's ruling. Ruling gave an order to these men. They'd do it. They'd follow all these orders. Terrible, terrible. And to see these men, if they were out in the walking out in the public, you'd never know they were murderers like this. You'd never. Okay. Here's a good picture. This is a good picture of the Palace of Justice. The first picture I showed you was taken right in the front here. Now this is an aerial view in the back. You see a half a horseshoe. That's where the prison was. And that's where I spent most of my time, is right in that half circle and back at the Palace of Justice.
Mr. Glenny, I'm going to wrap it up in a couple of minutes, and then people can stay and ask questions. How's that?
Okay. All right. I guess you've seen just about everything here. Let me just... No, yeah, I guess that's okay. Then if you want to ask some questions.
Well, what we'll do is, I know some of you guys want to play some sports and all that. First of all, let's give Mr. Glenny a big warm hand. Well, how about some huzzahs? Huzzah! Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip!